Welcome back to our faithful viewers and a heartfelt welcome to our new viewers for episode number 6 of Sports Triad, recorded on August 24th, 2026. Late breaking news, Deshaun Watson was named starting quarterback of the Browns, and we have a lot to talk about. Take it away, Steve.
We sure do, Ken. I mean, I am shocked. If you'd have asked me 24 hours ago, I would have not only said Deshaun Watson wasn't going to be the quarterback, I'd have put him on the scout team. But this is the NFL. What's your take, Tyler?
All right. Well, I might suck all the oxygen out of the room here because I have a lot to say, and there is absolutely nobody who is going to get away unscathed after this. So let's start, first of all, with the head coach. How do we get to this point? So Todd Monken gets hired in the offseason after the Browns fired Kevin Stefanski. And I think it's already clear Todd Monken got one of the worst deals in the history of deals when he agreed to take this job. Now, it's obviously his job to back up his guys during the press conferences, right? You can't have a coach coming in here and say, yeah, my starting quarterback stinks. We have no chance. You lose the locker room immediately. But when you watch Todd Monken talk about this quarterback situation and the fact that we're going to have Deshaun Watson as the Cleveland Browns starter in week 1, does it really seem like Todd Monken is thrilled by that prospect? Because I don't think he is thrilled by that. And frankly, having to defend how bad Watson's been day after day after day in all these press conferences, that is going to be completely exhausting for everybody by the end of the season. So that kind of leads me to this. It seems like this maybe isn't fully Monken's decision, if at all. It almost feels as if Jimmy Haslam was saying, let's give one more shot to my $230 million man. And if that's the case, if Jimmy is pulling the strings on the quarterback decision, it's pretty clear to me that Todd Monken is a sacrificial coach. Think about 2013 when the Browns hired Rob Chudzinski, and he was one and done after that season because, the Browns pretty much had to beg someone to take the job. And then when, choice number 20 took the job and it was Rob Chudzinski and it didn't work out, they got rid of him after 1 year. Or maybe another example of a different team would be the Houston Texans, Deshaun Watson's former team in 2021. They hired David Culley as the head coach, and they were even earlier in the rebuild than the Browns were. And they fired him after 1 season as well because it was really he was transitioning to the coach they actually wanted. And that's what it feels right now with Todd Monken. It seems like the Browns are planning to ride up this quarterback mess of Todd Monken, then fire him and start fresh once they get their real quarterback of the future. And really, that kind of leads me to ask, what good coach is going to want to come here and coach the Browns when they trapdoor Monken after this is over? Because if I'm a good coach or if I'm a hot offensive coordinator, I'm not going to want to come here after that. If we're going down this path, they really should have just kept Kevin Stefanski for this year, rode it out, and then fired him after this season. That would have been a lot more defensible. But instead, they fired Stefanski after last year. They hired Todd Monken. Now they're saddling him with Deshaun Watson as the starting quarterback, which is giving the Browns just a horrible look from a PR standpoint and, frankly, a horrible chance to win. So I don't see how this is a win in any way, shape, or form for Todd Monken. And everyone says, well, it's inevitable. They're going to bench Watson at some point and they'll start Shedeur Sanders. Well, if it's inevitable, why not just do it in week 1? And I think it's because Jimmy Haslam is behind the scenes pulling the puppet strings on this one and maybe influencing or forcing Todd Monken to start Deshaun Watson. So I'll say this, I'm far from finished. I've got a lot to say about Jimmy Haslam and Andrew Berry and Deshaun Watson himself, but maybe this is where I'll throw it back to you, Steve, and kind of see maybe what you think about this and what you kind of think about where Monken's at right now.
Yeah, I think he's in a real tough spot, but because I don't see how he makes this call without Andrew Berry's fingers all over it and Haslam's. How much of this you think is Berry also? Or do you think he's just following his marching orders?
Boy, I've got to think it's got to at least be a little bit of Andrew Berry as well, right? Because, however much influence you think Jimmy Haslam had on that initial trade, and certainly he had some, because you don't trade for a guy with Watson's A, salary, and B, accusations off the field without getting the approval of the owner. But at the end of the day, Andrew Berry's name is still on that trade. And there probably is still a little bit of pressure to try to make it work in some way, shape, or form. But here's my problem with where we're at with Andrew Berry right now. So it's not just the fact that he has Deshaun Watson. Andrew Berry spent 2 draft picks on quarterbacks last year, and now you're telling me neither of them is good enough to win the quarterback battle against Deshaun Watson? You just wasted 2 draft picks for a rebuilding team that absolutely needs to hit on their draft picks. That's crazy to me. You're telling me Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders are both worse options than Deshaun Watson after just 1 year. Horrible. And not to mention that, Andrew Berry ran Joe Flacco out of town twice. The first time in 2024 because he didn't want to hurt Deshaun Watson's feelings by keeping Flacco as the backup for 2024 when the fan base clearly would have rather had Flacco over Watson. In fact, this may sound crazy, but I'll go this far. If Joe Flacco was the starting quarterback for the Browns today, I would say they'd be a dark horse wildcard team. Not a favorite by any means, but a team that could maybe sneak in there and be close to 500 and maybe contend for a playoff spot. But instead, Andrew Berry has created a quarterback room that is such a black hole that there isn't even a glimmer of hope. Now, that being said, what percentage do you assign to Andrew Berry and what percent do you assign to Jimmy Haslam and what percent is Todd Monken in all this? I'd say it's maybe 50% Jimmy Haslam, 30% Andrew Berry, and 20% Todd Monken if I had to just throw some numbers at it. But Andrew Berry, I think he probably will get less blame than he should in this, but the fact that the Browns don't have any sort of safeguard at quarterback, they don't have a Joe Flacco, they don't have some sort of stable veteran that could at least be respectable at that position, that's an indictment on Andrew Berry. And the fact that you wasted a 3rd-round pick on Dylan Gabriel, and he basically had no chance to win this job. And, you could say, all right, the 5th-round pick on Shedeur Sanders, that was a lottery ticket, but that's a 5th-round pick that probably still is not going to be your starter when 2027 rolls around. So, again, I've got plenty to say about Jimmy Haslam, but, Andrew Berry, he kind of cooked up a pretty big mess himself as well.
Yeah, I think we could do a whole session on Andrew Berry because, I can't think of anybody who's made a bigger mess. You look at his teams, like last year, he left them without an offensive line and no receivers. And people are saying, "Oh, he built a great team." No, he didn't. It's an awful team.
We are in this situation in the first place because early in Andrew Berry's career as the Browns general manager, he did not hit on his draft picks, and especially the offensive line. Think about his first draft. Jedrick Wills at left tackle. What a horrible pick. We could have had Tristan Wirfs instead. That would have looked a lot better for the offensive line. And yeah, like you said, Steve, last year, the aging, decrepit offensive line they ran out to start the season gave the offense Flacco, Sanders, Gabriel, any of them, no chance. So I agree with you there. And yes, I'll give Andrew Berry credit where credit is due. Last year's draft looks really good. The Browns' second-year players this season have a lot of potential. And I'd be excited about that potential if they had any sort of quarterback that could unlock that potential. And I think this year's rookie class is great too. I love what Andrew Berry did in this year's draft. But how much credit do you give Andrew Berry for the past 2 drafts when the reason we've had such high picks, and frankly so many picks, is because we've had to go into this rebuild because of how bad his first few drafts were? So Andrew Berry, look, he can redeem himself, I guess, if he rebuilds the team, because it seems like they're going to give him a chance to rebuild the team without firing him. But why should I give you credit for fixing a mess that you created? It's crazy to me that when Kevin Stefanski got fired, Andrew Berry wasn't also out the door as well.
Yeah, I don't understand that either. I want to talk another thing about Watson because, his press conference, and I'm sure you'll want to hit on that too. Because, once he said that, I went back and I looked at the YouTube videos of when he got injured because, the narrative is that the Cleveland fans booed him when he got injured or cheered when he got injured.
Right.
And so I was like, let me see how bad it really was. And I went back, and the first thing I noticed was that there was 50,000 fans in that stadium for a 1-5 team. So, you beat up on the fans. They were there cheering their team on. And the second thing was, there was a couple idiots in the stands, but the stands were not in full out cheering when he got injured. I mean, there's some clips of one or two guys standing up cheering, but that was it. You take 50,000 fans, were 5,000, 10% of them cheering? No. Were 500, 1% of them cheering? No. Were 50, 1/10 of 1% cheering? Maybe. But it was more like 5 or 6 people who were cheering. And when he was hauled off the field, there was the usual polite, clap that you always give the player when he was hauled off. And if you want to call that cheering, it certainly wasn't. So I think they latched onto this narrative with a couple idiots, and of course nobody's going to cheer when somebody gets injured. A couple idiots, and they've latched on because it's fun to be the victim, right? And so anyway, so I think his press conference, and that's when I heard that press conference, I was like, that's it, he's gone. And nope.
That's the sad thing, isn't it? And look, I think we spend a lot of time talking about the people who brought Deshaun Watson to Cleveland in the first place, and rightfully so. I mean, Andrew Berry, Jimmy Haslam, they need to be held accountable for that trade because it was maybe not even arguably, it was the worst trade the NFL has ever seen. But I think sometimes we skip over talking about the quarterback himself, Deshaun Watson. And I think you hit on an important point there, Steve, with the press conference Watson had. I think Deshaun Watson is the classic story of a phenomenal athlete who never heard the word no in his life before going to the NFL. And he's never shown any indication that he's ever looked in the mirror and taken any accountability for himself. I would ask the question, Deshaun Watson, what is it you say you do here? He's not a good quarterback. He's not a good person. He's not a good teammate. I mean, you can just look at the time with Houston and how that ended when he basically bailed on the entire team because he was upset with his contract and wanted to be traded. I mean, you're not really bringing a lot to the table at this point if you're not putting up the stats on the field. And, you talk about the fans booing in the preseason game and how disrespectful it is and the animosity you have towards the Cleveland fans. You put a terrible performance on the field, people are going to boo, especially with that contract. You can't act like you're the victim here. You don't perform, you don't get any praise. And not to mention the off-the-field baggage that the Browns tried to wipe away when they got Deshaun Watson. That's as simple as it gets. And frankly, I can't possibly see how the Browns can endure 8 home games of this because you look at the preseason, there's thousands of empty seats, right? And it's because the NFL charges exorbitant ticket prices for an exhibition game where the starters barely play. When it's the start of the regular season and there's 60,000 people in the stadium booing you, this is going to be magnified even further. So if my starting quarterback can't handle hearing boos at the game when he's being paid $45 million per year, I question if he's mentally tough enough to handle the job. Watson has shown nothing but immaturity on and off the field. It's a victim's mentality. It's everyone's fault but my own. And yes, like later on today, he had another press conference where he tried to walk back those comments. Too late, buddy. We know your PR team got to you and said, hey, maybe blasting the fans who fill up the stadium isn't the best idea in the world when you're about to be the starting quarterback. Too late. We heard what you initially said. It's over. The words are out of your mouth. We're not putting those back in. And, speaking of press conferences, who doesn't have to answer questions about why Deshaun Watson's been so bad at these daily press conferences? Jimmy Haslam doesn't have to answer it. Who has to sit in front of the microphone every day and answer questions about that? Todd Monken, and to a certain extent, Deshaun Watson. But Jimmy Haslam already said during the offseason that this trade and this contract was a swing and a miss. You can't possibly put that guy back out there after that. You already admitted that this was a lost cause. By the way, we just talked about it. The guy you're paying $230 million to is openly blasting the fan base. Those are your paying customers. That's not exactly a great business model, Jimmy. And the last thing I'll say is, has anyone here ever heard of the sunk cost fallacy? Because Jimmy obviously hasn't. It's over. You already lost the money. The contract has already been guaranteed to Deshaun Watson. You're not getting any of that money back by throwing whatever's left of Deshaun Watson out on the field for 2026. I mean, at this point, Jimmy Haslam is totally chasing after a sunk cost by continuing to pursue this in any way, shape, or form. And the only guy who doesn't have to go in front of the microphone and answer for this, besides maybe once or twice a year, is Jimmy Haslam himself, while everyone else takes the fall for this, especially the head coach.
Yeah, I'll finish up the conversation with a prediction, and I'm predicting Game 4 is when we'll see the last of Watson. I think he'll still start the first 3 games, and he'll be pulled in the second half of Game 4.
You know why that's so perfect and why it's so sad to hear that? Game 4 is the Browns' second home game of the season. It's also their only primetime game of the season when they play the Steelers on Thursday night. And for years, it was a long-running tradition where when the Browns fired a coach, it would be after a season-ending loss to Pittsburgh. So it kind of seems only fitting that when they fire Deshaun Watson, it'll be after a bad first half against Pittsburgh. So I think he may be onto something with that.
All right. I think I'm going to put Tyler down in the column as slightly irritated with the Browns.
I'm shocked.
Stunning. For years I defended this team through thick and thin. I can't possibly defend this in any way, shape, or form. I mean, the Browns lost the preseason game in a big way, but the real loss is everything that happened after that preseason game.
Yeah, my lead for today was I was going to come in and say Deshaun Watson will be gone by this weekend.
It's a good thing you recorded this show on Monday. Otherwise, you would have been on freezing cold takes for that.
All right, let's move on to our Hardest Diamonds trivia question. Steve, I'm thinking of changing your nickname from Mad Dog to Puppy Dog Lance. You can't seem to stump Tyler, and I'm beginning to think you're just looking for love and affection, like a puppy dog would. So
that one hurts. That one hurts.
Is this the week? Have you done your research? Are you ready to sneak into the win column? Let's hear it.
This is it. This is the one I'm going to get him on because I dug deep for this question. So let me. I'm going to show the question here. Okay, so Tyler, and I'll show you the question, and then we'll get the answer later. So what this question is a could have, should have. So what I'll do is I'll give you the team and the player, and then you have to give me the Hall of Fame player that they passed up in the same position.
Ooh.
And there's 5 of them, and I'll give you credit if you get 4 of the 5 right.
Okay, this is going to be a good one. And for multiple reasons, I actually like your strategy of getting me fired up and yelling and ranting and raving before I have to think about the trivia question. So maybe that'll get my brain a little bit distracted.
All right. Now for our viewers, go ahead and put your answers in the comments. And in post-production, I'll leave this question up a little longer so they have time to look at it. But that's all Tyler gets to see.
All right. Moving on. So you're a Rams fan. It's Sunday, 1 p.m., September 13th, 2026. You have your chips and dip. You sit down to watch the kickoff of a brand new NFL season, except a rerun of the Love Boat's on. Yes, you want to find out how Captain Stubing's going to deal with all the zany antics on his boat. But chips and dips are meant for watching bone-crushing football, not middle-aged baby boomers having a midlife crisis. Where are the Rams? Well, the game's already over. You missed it. It was played halfway around the world at the cricket grounds in Melbourne, Australia. The cricket grounds, for Pete's sake. In this episode of Sports Triad, we'll look at Roger Goodell's effort to expand the NFL internationally. Steve, you want to give us a breakdown on the international schedule?
Okay, so this year, what is there? Is it 9? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 international games, and from Australia, which what is that? That's a 12-hour difference. So if you're a Rams or a 49ers fan, you got to be up at 2 a.m. if you want to watch it live.
I think they might adjust the time a little bit to at least make it somewhat palatable for the American viewers.
Yeah, I think the real shame here on these, and so if you ask me if I'm against international games, I'm definitely against them. And I think the real shame is, like, if you look at the Jacksonville Jaguars, they have 2 weeks in London So their and then the next week is their bye week. So their fans have 3 weeks in a row where, it's either 9 a.m. you got to watch the game if you want to watch it live, or you're in a bye week for 3 weeks. I'm old fashioned. I like football because at 1 o'clock on a Sunday, you plop down on the couch and you watch the Browns. Maybe occasionally it was 4 o'clock. But so for me, I think this whole deal with the international, play some second string team games or something like that, but sending your NFL to a different time zone, coming back with jet lag, I think it's just a bad idea. Tyler, what do you think?
Yeah, here's the thing with international games. So right now, the water has been, spilled out of the bottle. We're not putting it back in. The toothpaste is out of the tube, so to speak. International games are just a part of the NFL, and whether we like it or not, that's going to be the way it is. What I do have a big problem with, though, is some of the matchups they chose for this. So it's one thing when you have, let's use the Steelers versus the Saints as an example. NFC team versus AFC team. Yes, every game matters in the NFL, but Steelers Saints is going to matter a lot less than Steelers Ravens, right? Steelers Ravens might determine the division title or the wild card or anything like that. My problem with this year's international schedule especially is you look up and down. You've got Rams 49ers, that's a division game. Jaguars Texans, that's a division game as well. So when you start having these division rivalry games overseas during odd travel schedules, your body clock's kind of out of whack. The practice is going to be weird too, because how soon do you go overseas as well? You're really changing a lot of things in the games that are really going to determine the division winners and the playoff seeding. And not to mention playing at a different field, different turf, that sort of thing. And, these division games are set up where the teams get one at home and one on the road, perfectly balanced. And that's the way it should be. But now one of these two teams is going to lose a home game, but they'll still have to go on the road to their division opponents. So my biggest issue with the international schedule right now and the way it's set up is the fact that they're starting to play division rivalries overseas. And that's really alarming to me, because those are also the games your fans are the most invested in. And that's what they're taking away right now with that.
Yeah, as a fan, I feel like I'm in an abusive relationship with the NFL.
Yeah. Well, you think you're in an abusive relationship with the NFL. So part of the reason he brought this up is last week, Roger Goodell went on the record. He, said it out loud that it's inevitable that someday we are going to have an international NFL team. So before I give you my reaction on that, Steve, I think I know your answer to this, but what were your thoughts when you first heard Roger Goodell saying that there was going to be an international NFL team someday?
When I heard that, I said it better be Toronto, because if you have somebody in Europe, as that'll just be crazy. That one team would be in that time zone. I wouldn't even want a team in Hawaii just because of the time zone differences. So if you want an international team, put it in Toronto. Maybe Mexico City would be all right, but not Europe.
So I have a couple questions on it. One is, obviously, his whole thing is to make a bunch of billionaires even more money. I mean, it's all about the money, right? But right. Two is, so if you put a team somewhere in one of these cities, like right now, you're filling the stadium because it's something new and they don't ever get to see it. Are you going to have the fan base there? I assume if you have a team there, it's going to be every other week, maybe. I don't even know how you do that on the travel schedule, but are you going to have the fan base on an international team if you're the only team internationally? I don't know. Maybe.
These are all great questions too, because I feel at this point, the European NFL fans have probably adopted one of the current NFL teams as their favorite team. So the people in Europe who are really into football, they're already the fans of, the Packers or the Patriots or the Seahawks or name this team. So, I guess, do they drop that if there becomes a team in Europe? But here's the thing I'll say too. So we are laying out a lot of reasons why the NFL in Europe with one team wouldn't work. In fact, the travel schedule would be crazy. Even if you did a full division of European teams, you have London and Berlin and Paris, and they're all in the same division and they play each other. Even that would be so much. But, you're asking 60 plus guys in the football team who are from the US to, work overseas basically for half the year. So, we've talked about a lot of the reasons why this is impractical. Here's my tinfoil hat conspiracy time, though. I'm not taking what Roger Goodell is saying at face value. I actually don't think the NFL ever intends to have a team in Europe at any point. So why would Roger Goodell say it's inevitable that there's going to be a team in Europe at some point? Well, look ahead a few years. At some point, the collective bargaining agreement is going to expire, and the players and owners are going to have to negotiate a new CBA. This is a bargaining chip in the CBA. Why is it a bargaining chip? I think the NFL wants more international games. I think their dream scenario is an 18-week season where there's 16 international games and each team plays internationally once, right? And that would basically mean week 1, all the games are in the US, and week 18, all the games are in the US. But in between, there's always one international game. And he'll talk about spreading the game across the world and getting more notoriety in that way and exposing new fans to the game. And I think that's all secondary to one thing that's very important: inventory. Roger Goodell wants to make the TV executives happy because TV is where the NFL makes the greatest share of their billions and billions of dollars. And how do you make the TV executives happy? You open up a new window. And what does that mean? Instead of games at 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock and 8:30, the new window is 9:30 in the morning. We're going to have a 9:30 game every week, then a 1 o'clock game, then a 4 o'clock game, then 8:30. So Roger Goodell is basically starting by saying, hey, we're going to have an international team. The players union is going to push back against that for good reason, because that's going to be really tough working conditions for the players on that team if there was an international team. But if we're not going to agree to an international team, maybe we do agree to some more international games just to get Goodell off of that in the next CBA. So that's my tinfoil hat rant. I think this is a bargaining chip for the next CBA in a few years that Goodell and the owners are going to try to use to get more international games, basically, until they can almost have one of them per week. Am I crazy? Do I need to back it off a bit? Do I need to take my tinfoil hat off, or could I be onto something here?
No, I think you're onto it. I mean, yeah, and plus you're getting more television audience for, even the 1 o'clocks and the 4 o'clock games. I don't know what time it is in London when it's 1 o'clock here, but it's probably early evening there, right?
See, now you're asking me to do math.
Yeah.
Got time zones, but
Yeah, there's no math in this show. So.
That's right. I think it would be evening. I think it would be a night game at that point, but still, not midnight, but a reasonable watch time at night. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't even like Thursday night football. And I don't like Sunday night football. I want to see my team play at 1 o'clock on Sunday, like it was meant to be.
Yeah. And honestly, at this point, remember the whole NFL crusade about we're protecting the player safety and we've got all these better helmets to try to prevent concussions and, soft tissue injuries are down. Where is that right now? The data is pretty clear that after big travel like that, your body is more tired and you're more susceptible to injuries. Not to mention, we're already playing all these games on these artificial fields where the soft tissue injuries are going way up. But we can take those out and bring in natural grass when the World Cup comes to town. But God forbid we protect the players' health by having a natural grass field at all these stadiums. But yeah, the international travel, the short weeks, the weird structure of the schedule. I mean, heck, we're going to be playing a game on Wednesday night this year. Forget player health and safety. Throw that out the window.
All right. I had my rant. You had your rant. So.
This is one of our angriest shows yet.
Let's move on to something exciting. Let's talk about the AL wildcard race. What's it looking like, Steve?
Here, the surprising thing is that number 4 team right there, the Guardians, once again. So Ken, I just want you to note that I'm admitting I was wrong twice. Even though I know you think I never admit I'm wrong, but I was wrong about
we have this on tape.
I was wrong about the Guardians. They're making a charge, aren't they? What do you think, Tyler?
Yeah, I'm going to keep this brief because we've had a pretty long show so far, but the Guardians are making a charge. They've taken advantage of a very easy schedule to win 5 of their last 6 games, and they've got more of that coming up. So I am fully buying into the Guardians. In fact, I am so confident. Not only do I think they're going to get one of the wild card spots, I'm going to go on the record right now and say they're going to catch the White Sox and win the division, and the Chicago White Sox will have to settle for the third wild card spot. Guardians are playing really well right now. After one bad week, the pitching has gotten back on track. Joe Adele has 17 RBI in 17 games since joining Cleveland. He's given them the clutch hitting and the power they really needed. And the lineup, it's getting healthy. It's starting to come together and be competent. So I am fully buying into the Guardians. Not to mention, I think a couple of the more dangerous-looking teams like the Mariners and Tigers have really gone into a slump. So I am bullish on Cleveland's chances of not only getting one of the wild card spots, but catching up to the White Sox and winning the division title, especially with a very forgiving schedule coming up in September.
Yeah, last time we talked, the Guardians and the Tigers have switched places. Now the Tigers look like those sinking, and now the Guardians are charging ahead. So, yep.
Like
it'll be an exciting September.
Like every year in Cleveland baseball, we're going to take it down to the last game, probably.
Oh man, if recent history is any indication, you've got to like the Guardians' chances in a close race, though. If you look at it as recently as last year.
All right, time for the Hard as Diamonds trivia answer.
All righty, let me pull up the graphic. And we'll see me get a win finally.
We'll see about that.
Okay. So just to remind our viewers, this is in the draft. A team took a player, and a player at the same position there was a Hall of Fame player at the same position. So Tyler, we'll start with the 1998 draft. The Tennessee Oilers taking Kevin Dyson, number 16, instead of the 21st wide receiver pick that was taken by the Vikings. Do you know who that was?
I think I've got a pretty good idea. By the way, I like the attention to detail there for the Tennessee Oilers, but I believe the number 21 pick in that draft by the Minnesota Vikings was future Hall of Famer Randy Moss.
Oh, yes. Yes, it was. So let me just get my cheat sheet here just so I don't give you credit for something that no, it says Randy Moss. All right. The Jets took running back Blair Thomas, number 2 in the 1990 draft, and they passed on the 17th pick running back that the Dallas Cowboys took.
I'm going to go with Emmitt Smith.
Yeah, that one I gave you. That one was easy.
Yeah, that one was more of a layup.
Yeah. Okay, the third. So you got 2. You need to get 4. The Bucks took linebacker Keith McCants, number 4, instead of the 5th one that the linebacker by the San Diego Chargers.
Yeah, this one's extra painful because it was the very next pick. You start getting a little more obscure when you go for linebackers, but the number 5 pick in 1990 was Junior Seau.
That was one of the ones I thought I'd get you on. Okay, the Phoenix Cardinals took a running back, Garrison Harris, number 3 in the NFL draft. Not too bad, actually, but they could have had 10th
Wait a
pick
minute, Steve.
that the Rams.
I noticed Tyler smiling, but I don't want to give anything away. Go ahead.
Well, you think he's going to get it on this answer?
I don't know. He's smiling. Sorry
right.
to interrupt you. Go.
1993, the 10th pick by the Rams, Hall of Famer.
The engine of the greatest show on turf, Marshall Faulk. Oh, it wasn't Marshall Faulk.
It was Jerome Bettis.
It was a great one. Oh, that was a brilliant trick question. Oh, I should have known because Marshall Faulk he played in Indianapolis at one point. That was a good one.
Yeah, and of course Jerome Bettis is known for the Steelers, but he was drafted originally by the Rams.
Yes. Oh, that was a good one. That was a great inclusion.
All right, you have to get this one, or else I'll notch my first victory. So the Steelers took tight end Eric Green, number 21, in the 1990 draft. But they weren't alone. The Vikings, the Bucks, the Packers, the Saints, the Chargers, even the Browns all took took a wide receiver rather than this 7th round Hall of Famer that the Broncos took?
All right. Well, I got one wrong to prove that I'm mortal, but that famous 7th round pick was Shannon Sharp.
I kind of thought I thought I'd get you on Junior Seance, and I thought, and Jerome Bennis. Those were the two that I thought I'd get you on, but unfortunately, you got one of those. So
Yeah.
it's what? Is it 5-0? Is this our 6th or 5th or 6th?
I think it's 5-0 now. Yeah.
All right, next week.
That was good. You may have to up the grading standards. You may have to tell me I have to get them all right because there have been a couple. You have gotten me on a couple where I've gotten 4 out of 5, or maybe gotten one wrong, but I still, got enough to get a passing grade. We may have to grade on a curve for this, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Well,
Let's see. Let me just point out all of those picks except one of them, you weren't born yet.
that is true. Got to know your history, though, right? But that's how you get good at trivia. But yes, always a fun time answering the trivia questions. That's usually the way we end the show. But I wanted to throw in one more thing after we spent the whole show ranting and raving and being negative. We're going to end on a sentimental note because lost in all this news over the weekend, one of the greatest Cleveland Browns of all time, one of Cleveland's most beloved athletes of all time, Nick Chubb, announced his retirement over the weekend, and I thought it would be a good way to end the show just by giving a few thoughts on Nick Chubb's career. So just to kind of talk here about Nick Chubb, I don't really think it was ever just about what he did on the field. It was more about the way that he did it. And I think part of the reason why everyone relates to Nick Chubb in such a visceral way in Cleveland is there's kind of a part of Nick Chubb in all of us, or a part of us that aspires to be like Nick Chubb. He produced at a Pro Bowl level, obviously, but he did it in a way that's kind of unheard of in modern professional sports and the modern NFL. We're in the era now of elaborate touchdown dances and pointing and signaling after every first down, and defensive backs doing elaborate handshakes after the quarterback throws a terrible ball that has no chance of being caught. But in all of that, Nick Chubb was the total opposite. I never saw him point to signal a first down, let alone do anything to show anyone up or bring more attention to himself. He just put his head down. He got to work, he produced, and he didn't say a word while he racked up a 100-yard game after 100-yard game. One of the fun things that you can find on NFL YouTube now, teams do these mic'd up segments where they'll put a microphone on one of their players during the game, and afterwards they'll edit it and they'll produce it and they'll blast it out there so you can kind of see what the players are saying during the game. And the Browns did this a few times with Nick Chubb, and I kid you not, go look it up on YouTube yourself, folks. He did not say a word during any of these mic'd up segments. Even when he scored a touchdown, there wasn't even a yeah or a let's go. In fact, one of my favorite moments came after Nick Chubb scored a touchdown. Odell Beckham Jr. came up to him to congratulate him, and Odell said, "I want to get a touchdown." And Nick Chubb responded with the perfect line. He said, "I want to win." And that was just the total encapsulation of who Nick Chubb was as a running back and a person. I think we all want guys to succeed who are easy to root for. And that's why we loved Nick Chubb, because Cleveland just loves a hard worker and someone who earns everything and doesn't have to tell you a thing about it. He was never in trouble off the field. And how much have we talked about that today so far? And unlike other players and coaches who start snipping at the fans and the media when things go wrong, Nick Chubb is always accountable. Just yesterday I was out on my run and I was kind of thinking about how I wanted to end the show and what I wanted to say about Nick Chubb and what memories I wanted to bring up from his playing career. And there's too many highlights just to talk about. I mean, he had a run against the Los Angeles Chargers where he stiff-armed Hall of Famer Khalil Mack and made him look like it was me trying to tackle Nick Chubb. There was a game against the Steelers where Nick Chubb stiff-armed Miles Killebrew so hard, he dribbled him off the field like he was a basketball. That's how powerful it was. And, you go back to his rookie year, he makes an incredible touchdown catch with a defender draped all over him. There's a million Nick Chubb moments like that we could talk about, and we'd be doing a 2-hour show if we were talking about all his highlights. But I think the bigger point is Nick Chubb, when you watched Nick Chubb, what you felt watching him is what set him apart, because he just felt so much more relatable than any other players. And I think the sad thing is, on social media right now after Nick Chubb's retirement, there's so much talk about unrealized potential due to his final knee injury, but I don't think that's true. Nick Chubb realized his potential. at his peak, he was the best pure runner in the NFL, and that was the case for several seasons. And yes, his peak was cut shorter than I think anybody wanted due to that injury, but we got to see and experience the best Nick Chubb had to offer. Part of me wishes he would have continued his career by signing up a playoff contender to be a backup running back, going to Seattle or Dallas or Green Bay, a playoff contending team that probably needs a backup veteran running back and try to win a ring this year. But instead, Nick Chubb just went out his way, quietly and without any extra fanfare. The last thing I'll say here is thank you, Nick Chubb. I truly hope the Browns live up to their promise and induct you into the Ring of Honor someday because you so deserve it.
Well said.
Well said. So, that's a wrap. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and share this episode. See you next time on Sports Triad.